The current year couldn't end without a little bit more misandry from the moribund cathedral media based on junk pseudoscience by affirmative action hires. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Okay, so this will probably be my last political video for the current year, or maybe not. I mean, it's been an amazing year, and after many years in this business, I'm really looking confident to the next current year. Anyway, I'll leave that for the video scheduled for December the 31st. Alright, so some nobodies from Harvard, which is now the world HQ in pseudoscience when it comes to these things, published a study that allegedly shows that women are better at being doctors than men. Now, the study doesn't exactly show that, but the effects of the headline-grabbing conclusion has been a significant outpouring of hardline misandry from the usual suspects. The worst offender was the extreme militant left-wing platform Care2.org, which declared that men as a whole are guilty of 32,000 deaths because they don't follow the female way of doing medicine. But others, more mainstream and allegedly less extremist, weren't that far away either. NPR and the Clinton/Communist News Network behaved equally bad. Okay, so let's take a look at the short segment from CNN and dissect that one, and then we'll take a look at the study as well.
What is it, though, in particular? What did you find that gave women, or female doctors, I should say, the edge here?
Yeah. So, look, we've got about a dozen studies out there that show that women are more likely to practice evidence-based medicine. They communicate more effectively with patients.
Now this is actually not true, or at the very least not even remotely proven. First of all, if women had indeed been better communicators, then on the open market of healthcare, the most sought-out doctors would be almost always women. Yet that's hardly the case. With the exception of pediatricians, the most sought-after types of doctors, both in state and the private sector, are doctors with a clear male majority. Also, the top specialists in these areas are men, again with the exception of pediatricians. Again, if women had been so good communicators that pleased the patients a lot better, then the numbers on most sought after doctors would be different. But they're not. Now, this does not exclude the possibility that female doctors might indeed be better communicators, but this alleged aptitude doesn't seem to translate into success. So either the aptitude doesn't really exist in statistically significant numbers, or it's not really a relevant aptitude to begin with. Secondly, the idea that women practice, quote, more evidence-based medicine, close quote, is a claim similar to the claim that there is a teapot revolving around the universe. I mean, it's a claim that you can't really prove. It's a faith-based claim. Now, forgive me for not taking it seriously. I mean it when I say that I'm really an atheist. I mean that when I talk about Allah, and I mean that when I talk about the claims made to pander the minuscule, militant, lesbianic cult of feminism. Anyway, let's watch further.
But we really didn't know whether all of that led to better outcomes for patients or not, whether it really mattered. So we looked across at a national sample of older Americans, and we found that if your doctor is a woman in the...
Now stop right there. You looked at older patients. Now that's a red flag in and of itself. You know, older patients have a unifying characteristic. They're closer to their end of life than their recovery in youth. Now it's just a basic fact of life. Let's take a look at the facts presented to the right of the screen. A third of US doctors are women, yet 50% of med school students are female. So could it possibly be that maybe, just maybe, women don't exactly match men in their willingness to do the long hours and become a career MD? Because that's what the numbers say. Women routinely do the school and then drop out to have children, and a significant chunk of them never come back into the profession. Or if they do, they come back to do low-level medical work so they can have time for their kids. Now, this is not an indictment of women, mind you, it's just the facts. And at least in the United States, these facts are not, contrary to what feminists would tell you, a problem per se. There are enough doctors to go around. They just happen to be men, which doesn't really bother normal people, but it does bother feminists, the cathedral media, and generally the kind of people who make a living off inflicting societal cancer upon the rest of the world. The third fact shown there, that women make $20,000 less than men, is also true, but it is incomplete. This is a classic case of lying through omission, a practice widely spread in the cathedral media, the true purveyor of fake news. The fact that men work longer hours, the fact that men are willing to do and request to do extra jobs that are outside of their hiring job description, all of these do contribute to that gap. Even the feminist-inspired Time magazine article reporting on this fact acknowledges this reality, although the information is indeed buried deep in the article for obvious reasons. Alright, let's watch further.
Hospital, you're more likely to survive that hospitalization, and if you survive and go home, you're less likely to come back.
Was that surprising at all to you?
You know, it was. I actually expected that there would be no difference between men and women, and yet what we find is that pretty consistently for all the conditions we looked at.
Point of information, that pretty consistent difference is of 0.2%. In normal science, that's called margin of error, or irrelevancy. In feminist science, that's pretty consistent. Anyway, carry on.
Across a range of different types of patients, women pretty consistently did better.
So you said a wide range of patients. I know we talked about elderly patients when they came in, that they had a better survival rate, about 0.4%, but listen, we'll take every percentage point we can get here. But when you look at other age groups, do you find the same things? Is it consistent across that?
Now that's a very good question from the reporter. And the researcher answers exactly how you would expect from a gender ideologue. Let's listen.
Well, so we actually focused just on people over 65. We looked at people in the Medicare program. But we found that even among the sickest Medicare patients, actually among those, the benefits of having a woman doctor was even more pronounced than among people who were less sick. So the sicker you are, the more important it was that you got a bigger benefit, I guess, of having a female physician.
Translation: no, we didn't look at other age groups, and no, the study is not a double-blind like it's normally done in normal science, where the pursuit of truth is the point and not scoring ideological points. In the article on the CNN accompanying this segment, we also find this phrase, quote, "The study researcher, Dr. Ashish Jha, said in a recent interview that he felt, quote, very confident that if he had looked at younger patients, the results would be very similar," close quotes. So, in other words, yeah, I didn't actually test my suppositions against reality or against possibly contrary evidence, but I'm so smart, therefore I'm right, so why bother testing? Now, the reason I chose the segment rather than the article is because the segment is far less cringy to follow. Now, you can read the article yourselves, it's in the low bar. It even includes quotes from Hillary Clinton, for crying out loud. Anyway, the thing missing from the CNN reporting is the link to the actual PDF. Now, to their credit, the NPR did that and linked to the actual PDF. So let's take a quick look at the significant difference that the smart researcher, who was probably hired as an affirmative action tick box, well, that or Harvard is now so low that it hires stupid on purpose. So anyway, let's look at the results. So, JAMA Internal Medicine, comparison of hospital mortality and readmission rates for Medicare patients treated by male versus female physicians. Now let's scroll straight to page 5 where some actual data is shown. Alright, so Table 3 and 4 are what's of interest to us and are the basis for the researchers' assertion that there is a significant and consistent difference in mortality and readmission rates based on the sex of the doctor treating that patient. Well, it is consistent, all right, but significant? Hardly. The closest it gets to significant is on sepsis admissions, where the difference in mortality on average is 2.05%. Now, that is to say, patients treated by women had an average of 2.05% higher chance of surviving sepsis. Still low and within the statistical error, but significant considering the rest of this study's results. Also notice that they looked on 8 conditions. Now that is hardly a wide variety of conditions, as the researcher claimed in many interviews, but whatever. Now for other conditions outside sepsis, the difference is lower than 1% and solidly within statistical error of any commonsensical researcher looking at these results, but not for this gender ideologue though. What about readmissions? Well, the paper claims that, quote, patients' readmission rates were significantly lower for female physicians than male physicians for most of the conditions. Emphasis mine. So let's see how significantly lower they indeed were. Oh, wait. 0.64, 0.87, 0.79, 0.53, 0.04. Yeah, very significant indeed. I bet that if you check for how windy the weather was in each day, you get higher significance than that. Now, sure, the weather has little to nothing to do with this, but neither is the doctor's sex, as this researcher's own data shows. In fact, I would argue that there is a bigger case for why wind matters more. After all, it's too bloody windy outside and I'm not feeling that sick, so it can wait, is a much more solid argument for not going to the hospital than a lady treated me, therefore I won't go again. Now, another point that clearly needs to be made, and indeed should have been made in the discussion segment of the study, is the absolute fact that the vast majority of people, both men and women, do indeed prefer to be treated by the members of their own sex. Now this, when combined to the fact that women go more often to the doctor even for small things, whereas men only go when things are really bad, could explain the minuscule difference much better than the feminist claptrap pseudoscientific nonsense espoused in the cathedral media by various ideologues and the researcher himself. But then again, that would mean doing actual research as opposed to advocacy research. The difference between the two is very clear and has been since the concept of research has come to fruition. Actual research means the researcher always asks, what if we're wrong? How can we prove that we're wrong? Advocacy research, however, means that the researcher, really just a political hack with a degree, comes with the conclusion first and then seeks out things to confirm his or her vision. This piece of research is solidly in the latter category. Now, if you look further into it, it contains an enormous amount of manipulations, allegedly to attempt to account for experience and environment, yet nowhere is it mentioned the fact that even if his preconceived conclusion had been true, it is still a practical limitation, namely that female doctors don't really work that hard or that long. Basically, this, study doesn't merely have limitations. All studies have limitations after all, but this one has a horrid amount of deficiencies and a fundamental methodological flaw. It shouldn't even be called a research study, since no double-blind actual study has been conducted. This was basically analyzing data that already existed based on a preconceived bias. This isn't even a high-level informational guide. It is, by definition, a quasi-scientific analysis, which is literally the lowest level of scientific research. And mind you, the academic world is now rife with such disdainful nonsense. which is why I routinely remind those who claim to be skeptics that just because something is written by someone from Harvard in a quote-unquote peer-reviewed journal, that doesn't mean it's true. Or that what's written there is the result of researchers doing their due diligence to avoid publishing, well, bullshit. In fact, quite the opposite is true with these social science types of studies, a majority of which have, well, a huge problem. They tend to lack the basic requirement to even qualify as science. That would be replicability. So yeah, this is how false narratives are being built. This is how the wage gap mythology has been built, and it still refuses to die. This is how Keynesian socialist bollocks in economics has been built, and again, it refuses to die. The fact of the matter is that pretentious nonsense like this, if not stopped in its infancy, slips into policy. And interventionist policy is bad enough, but policy based on entirely wrong facts? Now that's a recipe for disaster. The United Kingdom knows this the best when they kept on pushing for more women in medicine in the name of equality, and also based on similarly fishy research that showed alleged benefits of having more women there, even if by force. The result is a chronic shortage of staff in the NHS, which is duly filled by immigrants. So instead of having British men working in the NHS, you have self-selected immigrant men and women working there, and still nowhere near the equality that's been promised. What I mean by self-selecting immigrants is the fact that immigrants ending up working on the NHS are usually the type of immigrants who allegedly got an education and have already sorted their lives in such a way that they can afford to work as hard as possible, which usually means a lot harder than British women. Now, this was in the past simply expressed by a much higher proportion of men in the NHS. That was fine. But with affirmative action in colleges and universities, you have, let's say, 100 graduates, of which 50 are men, 50 are women. 5 years after graduation, 49 of the men and only 30 of the women still work in the field. 10 years after graduation, 48 of the men and 20 of the women still work in the field. Now that's called a shortage. In the past, before state-enforced misandry, out of 100 graduates, only 25 were women, and 10 years after graduation, 20 of those 25 women would still work there. In other words, only women who really wanted to be doctors would actually pursue this. The bottom line is that adopting even more female-favoring policies like the chattering class is suggesting, following this quasi-scientific analysis masquerading as a study based on the entirely unproven notion that women are better doctors, will result in a shortage. Now everyone will be worse off as a result of it. But maybe that's the point. Nah, whatever. We'll talk more about this, well, in 2017. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Thank you for your continuous and generous support throughout 2016. And I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.